models of collaboration here in Denver and in Colorado, and then those 5 people that represent those projects will come up and be able to specifically answer your questions. So, there we go. We're on our 3rd computer this morning of this particular presentation. So I want to thank the guys in the room who have bailed me out and helped get this up here, and they may yet have to come up and help, but so far we're good. So, glimpses of Denver and of Colorado. Those of you who are not from Colorado probably have heard of us in ways that we would not be happy about. Crises that have happened in Colorado, like Columbine and the theater shooting, and of course the young 10-year-old girl that was killed here recently. So we, like every big city, have major issues that need to be addressed. We also have a huge refugee population. Over the last several years, we have about 40,000 refugees and people taking asylum in Colorado. That is about 1,100 new ones a year that move into our region. The city and county of Denver proper is the 5th largest growing major urban center in the United States. So an influx, besides the 360 days of sunshine, there are lots of reasons why that number continues to grow. Immigration populations about doubled in the last 10 years. Our economy, again, a major metropolitan area, we have about 8% unemployment, but there are 7 of our counties that have over 20% unemployment rates. So very high in some of our counties. Homelessness, we have about 12,000 people on the streets in Denver, and about 60-some% of those are families on the streets, people with children. So those are some of the things that might describe our area, but I want to share with you some of the great things that we think God is doing in our city as well. 5 projects that I'm going to talk to you about. One is the Art of Neighboring. I see Dave's books up here on the book table. We're going to talk about the homeless initiative that's happening here in Colorado, one on adoption and foster care, and one on specifically directed towards refugees and land here in the urban center. And then we're going to talk about a few interfaith works. Now, know that all of these things that we're going to address are in various stages. Some are in exploratory stages, and I think we can learn something from them. Some of them are many more years along. So first, the art of neighboring. How many of you have either heard Dave speak on this? He's all over the United States talking about it. So in a survey that was done, only 28% of people said they did not know even one of their neighbors. How about you? Do you know the people who live close to you? I lived in an apartment complex for a while. I think it's hard in houses. Try living in apartments. And that's the trend that we're moving to, is more and more people moving into multi-unit facilities. So this project began when a group of pastors went to their city officials and asked the question of what can they do, and they were pretty surprised at the answer.
In January of 2009, a group of pastors came together to dream about what it would look like to join our congregations together and to really make a difference in our community. In order to understand the big issues that those in our city are facing, we decided to invite in the mayor of our valley.
About a year ago, I met with a group of pastors who asked me what's the best way they could help serve our city. There are a lot of issues that face our community, but the majority of them could be drastically reduced if we would just become a community of good neighbors.
The mayor of our city just asked us to obey the scriptures, to take Jesus seriously and said, love God, love your neighbors yourself. The mayor said that to a group of pastors. That's convicting. That's embarrassing.
There was something very powerful in the fact that one of the leaders of our city was inviting us to start a movement in which we rediscover the art of neighboring. couple months later, we came back together, and this time, just to pray and to think about what we had heard. And we invited Vicki Ryder, who was the assistant city manager. And Vicki again said something in passing, just like Bob had done, that just stopped us in our tracks.
I've been working at the city about, 14, 15 years. I've been dealing with neighbors, neighborhoods, community issues. And I gotta be honest with you, from the city's perspective, there's not a lot of difference between the way Christians and non-Christians live.
That was the moment that really cemented for many of us in the room that we needed to do something together.
This is your house. These are your neighbors' houses. How many of these neighbors do you know by name? Go ahead, try to name them. If you're like most people these days, you probably only know a few of your neighbors by name. We have garages for our cars, privacy fences for our backyards, and we seem to be perpetually busy. You're doing pretty well if you wave or say hi as you're passing by. But what if we did more? What if we made it a point to learn the names of the people who live on our block? What if we took the time to listen to our neighbors and find out what makes them tick? What if our neighborhoods relied on each other in times of need, whether it be for a cup of flour or a shoulder to cry on? What if Jesus really meant that we should love our actual neighbors? Imagine the difference you can make in your neighborhood if you've got to know your neighbors better. Imagine the difference you can make in your community if you partnered with others who had a desire to become better neighbors. Imagine the difference it can make in our cities if local churches were working together to make this a reality. You don't have to imagine very hard. It's happening.
Today, 55 churches are committed to taking this message to their neighbors, and that translates to the people in those congregations, about 27,000 people. So you can see how just a few can make such a huge difference. There are similar initiatives happening in other states, and I'll tell you some more in a little bit about where you can get some resources having to do with that. The Road Home Project. This was an interfaith initiative that came out of the city and county of Denver. It's in year 7 of a 10-year initiated project, but it too began in 2004 with a group of pastors who went to their city leaders and asked, what can we do to help? The mayor's answer at that time was to figure out how to eliminate homelessness. So in 2006, the Denver Road Home Project was initiated. The Denver Rescue Mission and the City of Denver came up with the original financing for this. And some of you might be asking, how does that work? How does state and church separation, what are they going to think of us if we come to our city officials and ask that question? So I want you to hear this from, to give some understanding here. At the time, the Denver mayor was Hickenlooper. He is now the governor of Colorado.
I think it's really profound because it builds upon natural connection of people to give back and to give. And what better way to kind of reach in and make a connection with that impulse in people through their faith-based activities, to go to the church or the synagogue where they already are and they're meeting, they're filled with that spirit. And this is a way of tapping into that and allowing them to do what they're already naturally inclined to do, to reach out to them. Most faith-based organizations, most churches and synagogues and mosques already do so much good in the community and kind of reach across all the different denominations and coordinate them, have them all working in the same program, in the same effort. It's church. You know, that there's got to be a separation of church and state. And that just seems so crazy because the key is we don't favor one church or one denomination over another. We don't favor Christianity at the expense of another religion. What we try to do is give an opportunity for all faiths and all service organizations to step up and help people that are really, for many of these families, it's the first time they've ever slipped into this kind of despair when things have gone so badly that they're homeless. And you know, for government to kind of help integrate and collaborate and coordinate those natural activities that happen from the faith-based community already to try and maximize those, that's exactly what government should be doing, right?
What a concept. That's exactly what government should be doing. So far, about 2,000 people from 260 congregations across the area have become mentors through a project, through the Deborah Rescue Mission, a Christian-based portion of this. Those advocates have been for 744 homeless families and seniors. And the success factor on this is pretty high. 87% of those who are mentored by this program actually maintain housing for up to a year. If you know anything about the Homeless Project, getting people to even stay in housing and move towards sustainability has very low success factors. So 87% success factors is really good. Churches are asked to develop teams of 4 to 6 people, and they supply $1,200 in financing per family that they help. Now the catch that goes towards the first and last month's rent. Some of these families could make month-to-month payments, but it's the first and last. How many of you have ever lived in apartment housing or temporary housing? That's a big piece of money to come up with all at once. So that's part of what this does. Then they work with these families. They meet with them about 7 times over 4 to 6 months. They help them with budgeting, working out the issues that are keeping them from being able to live in a sustainable manner. So they've created about 2,000 housing units where people can actually move in and find housing. In a large metropolitan area, that's a lot. They're also working with businesses and asking these businesses to help by employing these people. And they admit that when they first went to them and asked them if they would hire people who were coming off of the streets, they had a lot of fear about doing that. But they have since found that these are highly motivated people who want to make this work and that they become really good workers. The next project then I want to tell you about, let's see.
For one over another and help everyone do more.
There we go. Is Project 127. In 2004, we had 875 kids in the foster care and adoption cycle that had been identified as could be adopted, but they needed homes to do that with. A pastor by the name of Pastor Robert Jelinas, who is himself an adoptive father. He has 1 natural child. He's adopted 3 kids from the system and has 2 kids that he's adopted from Africa. So he went to his government official also and asked, what can we do to draw these numbers down? Kids who need families, who have been identified as adoptable, but do not have families. So I'm going to let him tell you his story.
25,000 children age out of the system, not knowing who's going to visit them in college, not knowing who's going to walk them down the aisle, not knowing who's going to help them with the basic things of life. You know, when I'm putting my children to sleep, when my congregation is putting children, their own children and their adopted children to sleep, there's still a whole lot more that are still going to sleep in foster care, not knowing who's going to be there with them for the rest of their life. How do you have that? Where's the breakdown? Why are we not able to give every single one of these children a home? I went to our Lieutenant Governor's office. Lieutenant Governor Norton just said to her, is there anything that we can do?
Here's the Lieutenant Governor and her committee saying, we're going to embrace the church.
I asked our people to come and meet with me and to sort through what options we had available to us. And Project 127 is what our people came up with. By God's grace, by churches working together, we will see no children waiting for homes in Colorado. That's the goal behind Project 127. Everything is designed around that.
It's like, okay, well, just take it slow. It'll be okay. You've now been given permission by the Lieutenant Governor's office to work with church. This is going to happen.
Body of Christ needs to come
So when I talk to my church, I talk about everybody needs to be involved, and the only question is how are you involved? Some of you are going to take children right into your home, and if that's what God's calling you to do, do it. Others of you will support a family that does that. You're either going to provide babysitting, or you're going to, you might be the one whom God has blessed with extra financial needs, so you're going to set up college funds for these kids. But somehow all of us together are going to provide families and care for orphans.
One of the core values that they talk about is having wraparound families. You've got a number of families that come alongside and help with anything from babysitting to projects around the house that can need respite care, anything like that.
Knowing that there was somebody there to call if we had any questions, I think was really helped us have a good, solid peace of mind.
The first probably week to 2 weeks that they were in the house, I don't think their feet touched the ground. The other kids that we had in the house, they were just constantly holding and just pouring out their love on them.
Without Project 127, I don't know that we would have ever, I honestly don't believe that we would have ever called up the county and said we want to adopt.
And if it wasn't for the project coming into our lives when it did, I mean, we wouldn't be with Isaiah right now.
Dozens of churches, I think we're over 40 now, 40 churches that are involved to try and, our goal is very simple, no children waiting for homes in Colorado.
Until the church would partner with government about making a difference, that's something I would want to do. That's something I'd want to be a part of.
That project has 220 adoptions so far since 2005, and they have another 51 in process. So it's working, and churches are coming alongside and being encouragers and support people to those that are taking these children into their homes. The next project is a refugee project. This is one of those that's in a discovery process, but I thought it would be worth your while to hear more about it. How many of you have heard of the Dayton, Ohio Vacant to Vibrant Urban projects? Is that familiar to anyone? Okay. Well, this again began with a pastor who looked around at the community around him and realized how many refugees lived in a very small radius around his church who were living in severe poverty, and asked the question, what can we do about it? Now, rather than figure out how to recreate the wheel himself or be just an individual in a silo, he began to ask the question of his circle of influence and said, how are other people addressing this issue? Which is a part of what this roundtable is really all about, is sharing those resources and ideas of how other people are doing it. So the Rocky Mountain Baptist Association is pulling together people to ask that question. Now, the Dayton, Ohio project comes from a city where lots of urban vacant land, empty schools that got plowed under because it's more expensive to fix them up or sell them than it is to just plow them under. And yet they realized they had thousands of refugees who needed jobs and who needed food. And so they pulled together the Ohio university people, the city people, and the churches and said, what can we do together to address this issue? Now, in some cases they looked at vacant land and were able to use it to actually put crops in the ground, let people use the ground and actually grow crops. But in a lot of these cases, even in cities where, in areas where the ground was actually cement, they said, what can we do even with this land? And they began to bring in tunnels, kind of like greenhouse type environments, and set them on top of the cement. Each one of those can grow $20,000 worth of vegetables and crops that get used by refugees and people who are in poverty. So the question is, what's happening around you? Who already knows how to do something about it? and getting access to those kinds of resources. So I was invited to sit in on the conversation where you bring in the school district and you say to the school district people who know much more about what's going on in these families oftentimes than we in the church do. So inviting everybody to the table and having that discussion about what do you see, what are your resources, what do you need, and then pulling that together. The hope is that what they will learn will turn into a project, maybe not exactly like Dayton's, but they will be able to learn from that project and be able, these refugees, for example, are an agrarian society. So how are they used to making a living? What kind of skills do they have? And what kind of resources can we match up with that so that everybody wins? The last one I'm going to tell you about is just some initiatives that are happening in the city and around the city in the area of interfaith. Oftentimes when you bring up interfaith conversations among Christians, it makes them really nervous. That's kind of a scary topic to think about. We're much more comfortable, maybe not even comfortable with other Christians, but when you start talking about interfaith conversations, then that makes everybody really nervous. There's a pastor here in Denver that's doing a lot in the area of interfaith, and he said, oftentimes when I tell people I'm working on an interfaith project, they assume that automatically means that I'm no longer a Christian, or that I don't believe in my Christianity now. He said that's simply not true. He said, my faith has been strengthened. I know what I believe more now because of conversations with people outside of Christianity. If we're going to address the issues of our city, we have to recognize we're not the only ones in the city. And staying within our own little silos is not going to be and bring the solutions that we need. So here's just 3 interfaith programs that are happening in Denver, again at various stages. One is taking place in a northern suburb of Denver. It's called Broomfield, where an interfaith work is starting there of trying to bring people of all different faiths into the same conversation. In our area, suburbanization of poverty is a huge issue. In big cities, we were used to thinking about poverty being in the inner city. Those who were in the inner city had these conversations. They knew how to work with it. They had the resources. They had the staff. Now we're finding that poverty has moved into the suburbs, where somebody lives next door to you in a really nice house, but you don't know that it's being foreclosed upon, or that they can't put food on the table. So the idea of what poverty looks like is not nearly as identifiable as it used to be. And churches in the suburbs don't have the staff, don't have the resources, the knowledge to understand how to deal with these topics. So that's one of the things that's happening with this particular project. The other one is these action circles. And essentially what they are is trying to get people of different faiths to sit down at the table and know how to have a conversation. What a concept. But we have so learned to have our own conversations that we don't listen and really want to understand the perspective of someone different from us. So this particular organization has developed a curriculum of actually sitting people down and teaching them, actually practicing the skills of having a conversation where nobody's trying to win. They're just trying to listen. They're hoping to have 100 of these circles here in Denver. The last one comes out of Jefferson County, a faith-based department in the county, and they want to work with churches, and they are having some success in doing that. But because they found our weaknesses, the ones that say, if so-and-so comes to the table, then I don't want to play in the sandbox. And they said, then we will take on the responsibility of trying to teach these people how to collaborate and be in partnership with each other. So they're putting on a conference on partnerships and collaboration coming out of this Jefferson County. Okay, commonalities of all of these things that you've heard. One is asking and listening. Not assuming that you know what the answers are, but asking and listening. Really listening to the perspective of other people. The second commonality is a spirit of service and humility. Being there to serve. And the last one is multiplication. You know, we've heard that even from the last presentation of people saying, we want to take what we learn and give it to other people. So I'm going to ask the people in the rest of this project who represent all of these projects that I just told you about. Multiplication, just so you know, Andrew, will you join me up here? Andrew is with the Denver Rescue Mission, and he's the one helping with this, the Road Home, or our homeless project, matching up churches with mentors. Rescue Mission has set aside a budget that they're willing to come to your city and help you figure out how to do this. Dave Runyon, where's Dave? I saw him there. In the art of neighboring. Dave has put, he said, everything he knows in a book. He's also put everything on their website, artofneighboring.com, and where you can download free resources and get information about how to start a movement in your area. Project 127, the orphans and foster care. Susan Wright is here. She's a case manager with the Project 127, and she can talk to you about their experience and what they're seeing in working with churches and that kind of thing. The Refugee Project, Bob Ryan is here with the Rocky Mountain Baptist Association. Bob's hoping that this particular project they can take, do it here as a pilot, learn from it, and multiply it all throughout their organization. And then Deb Meyer is with the Broomfield nonprofit, working to establish an interfaith organization with suburban churches who are just new in the game of figuring this out, and also talking and making the table conversation available to people of other faiths. Challenges. We're a huge geographic area. Having a city initiative doesn't work in a geographical stretch of an area and 3 to 4 million people. And so breaking it up into regional areas and having projects that function in a locale is something that Dave City Unite organization is trying to do. We have Love Inglewood, Love Golden, Love Thornton. We have all kinds of organizations, but trying to pull those networks together, not necessarily to do common projects, but just to share and be of support to each other. Challenges for the organizations like the Neighboring Project and the Adoption Project is having churches that treat it as a one-time, short initiative and really doesn't change anything about the paradigm of what they believe the church is about. So they're willing to engage for a short period of time, but then they move on, and that can be a real challenge to getting people to understand making it a priority instead of just a project. Another challenge is this whole issue of evangelism. What is the gospel versus common good? The Lausanne Conference has well established that tension that exists between those two of evangelism and doing things for the common good. So I don't think there's any need for me to say more about that. In the refugee projects, I talked to a lot of people in this arena. Language, cultural differences, things that they had assumed. They wrote out their value statement like what you all saw before. They thought they had agreement with these people about what these projects would be about, but then when they really got into it, they figured out they really didn't mean what they said. It wasn't because of anything, they weren't lying or anything, it was a cultural difference that because they said yes, didn't really mean they meant yes to that. And so even language barriers, they said, you know, when we're trying to work with people from other countries, we don't have enough interpreters. We can't carry on conversations easily with these people. And that it's a very slow process. If you're looking for quick fix things, this would not be necessarily an area to get into. And then finally, this area of interfaith, part of this is real trust factors. not only trust among Christians, but trusting people of different faiths. So there's some real challenges in believing that the guy who's running these action circles, for example, said people show up to these conversations and they can't wait to get to the point where they're going to get to present on their topic or their thing that they care about or their piece of an argument. They can't really believe that this is just going to be about talking. So it's some real issues that I think we've established between Christians and people of other faiths. Still to be done, I was glad to hear Howard say the part about working with businesses and people of other cultures and helping them understand their piece in city reaching and affirming what it is they're doing. More thought around this interfaith topic and how we're going to work together in addressing these issues of the city. And finally, some intentional work on really listening to people. Here's the good news. This is a quote from Gabe Lyons out of his book, Next Christian, and he talks about how people really feel about Christians, and it wasn't always a very positive picture, but here's a quote that I really latched onto from that. He says, "The church remains the epicenter of what is possible. It's the most uniquely positioned channel of cultural influence when it's operating on all cylinders." And I think that's what we're calling people to here today, is that the church come back to operating on all cylinders.